Always join in. Yeah, you've got to stay on it for now because we're in town.
Yet all this administration does is sit there moaning on the sidelines instead of getting on and doing something positive about it. And you had a great example of this tonight when both the proposer and the seconder of the Green motion said nothing at all about their budget. All they did was attack the government. Councillor Kitcat, of course, can't say very much positive because he's leaving us. Now, officers have obviously written the section in paragraph 3.41 on page 19 of the agenda, and certainly not Councillor Sykes or Councillor Kitcat. Cap it all! The extensive poll carried out in the Brighton.
You can't play politics with people's jobs and with people's services or with their homes. All this, Mr Mayor, was true 30 years ago when Neil Kinnock first said it. It's still true today. Whilst voting down a budget might play well with the Guardianista devotees of Caroline Lucas, for the average working family in this city, it will be their services broken up and sold off by Pickles-appointed bureaucrats, and it will be Labour who has to deal with the wreckage after May. But some Greens and some Tories won't care about that. Politics first, residents second. The promise of 1,000 homes laid bare by the reality of just 147 built. The promise of a new school broken while not a solid earth has been turned. The promise of a zero-waste city made laughable by our fall to the bottom of the league when it comes to recycling. Mr Mayor, in the eyes of the national media, the Green Party has made this city, of which I am proud, a laughing stock.
I think we haven't done our job properly this year. I think we should have passed one budget based on a particular council tax level at P&R 2 weeks ago. That's what I thought budget P&R was for, and not end up today having to look at 3 budgets instead of 1 and endless amendments. Now, you know, I really wish all the best to the officers who are going to start to put all these things together as we vote and somehow reconcile everything together. I really don't know how they're going to do it, but for me, that's why it's so complex this year.
We've now hit a financial crisis, as we all know. And that's something that obviously should have been dealt with, I believe, over those several years, not just this current administration, but previous administrations. I believe that when you have a financial crisis, then you have to look to frontline services and you have to take a moral stance on behalf of the residents of this city. We cannot carry on like this, Mr Mayor. We have to actually genuinely look after the residents in terms of what they have to pay in taxes and the frontline services that they need to meet their daily requirements. So it seems tonight the only reserves that we have available are the amount of money that the Green administration has put aside for the referendum, the £1.178 million. I believe it would be immoral to spend that money on that referendum, whatever the result. I wouldn't predict the result of that referendum. However, having had that discussion with Councillor Summers, I believe that we have to make some sort of judgment of Solomon and try and protect some of those services that would disappear if we don't actually put some resources into them. The one that I'd like to particularly bring to your attention tonight are the youth services. They are basically provided by voluntary organisations. Hopefully the new council, when it's formed, in May, will actually go on and reorganise this council and this city so that we can actually look after all the residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
I actually want to talk about the council and this budget, and I'm directing this particularly at the administration. Before asking residents of the city to pay more, they actually need to get their house in order. And quite frankly, over the last 4 years, they have failed to deliver this. Now, backfilling is temporary staff. Temporary staff cost money, and this all equates around budgets. This council is not only paying temporary staff, but it's also paying consultants, interim posts. But they have not continued to work under our administration to restructure the council, to make it effective and put it on very firm foundations.
We have several options before us today, but they all contain massive cuts, and as such I can't support any of them. Of course, the Tories want to make the deepest cuts by freezing council tax, so those who pay most, their millionaire mates, benefit, while those on low incomes or entirely reliant on benefits don't pay any more at all anyway. They wouldn't see the benefit. Our Labour councillors, with their rather pathetic 1.99 raising council tax proposal, are in favour of almost as much austerity. So I don't think we should support any of them. I think it's time to take a stand and to tell this government that here in Brighton and Hove we won't put up with any cuts at all, and demand that it gives us the money we need to provide the services local people need. Of course, the government said they won't do it, and any refusal to set a budget will mean they send a hit squad of civil servants. They'll come and do it for us, they say. And of course they would say that, wouldn't they? It's called a negotiating position. It doesn't make it true, though. Think about it. Would the Tories really send civil servants to impose cuts on reluctant local people a few weeks before a general election when they're defending marginal constituencies? I doubt it. And even if they did, would those civil servants cross determined union picket lines and protest to get into council offices when they get here? I doubt that too. No, I suspect, faced with some resistance, the first in the country to imposing their cuts, they'd find us money on the back of a sofa somewhere in the Treasury and give local people a much better deal. Of course, many in this chamber, we heard earlier, will say disdainfully that this is just plain politics. Well, isn't politics what we're here to do? It is politics. It's about taking a stand against the politics of austerity. It's about saying no to cuts. It might not work, but at least we'll have tried. So I urge you all to vote against this budget proposal, whether it's amended or not, and tell the government that the people of Brighton and Hove won't do its dirty work for it any longer.
Employment's up, unemployment's down, both across the nation and the city, inflation's down, inequality is down, growth is up. Check the facts. Inequality. Inequality is down. I've got that right. Tonight, Mr. Mayor, I sometimes ask myself, what is the point of the Labour Party? Tonight, they have shown me there is no point of the Labour
Party. Fourth time in the blinking of an eye. Here we have the Green Party, over there the blue, over there a sort of shade of red. But what we are all enduring, Mr. Mayor, if I might put it this way, is the political equivalent of 50 Shades of Grey. Our hands are tied politically. We're under the national lash. And outsourcing isn't the word to get us out of this. Now, you might think this metaphor in poor taste, but what I say to you is the national situation is in the worst possible taste. Cuts are being felt now, particularly across Hove and Brighton and Port Slade. And what struck me most so far today is Councillor Anne Norman's comment. She said we're in increasingly difficult circumstances. Is Councillor Norman at odds with her own government? Because if she was supporting with what her own government is doing, her phrase should surely have been increasingly wonderful circumstances. So I see some elements of doubt in the blue corner. But why is all this being done? It's what I've just come up with a phrase. It's the devolution of blame. Nationally, they know that people living locally will blame the first level of authority, a council. We've all heard variants on the phrase the blooming council, some rather stronger than that. But, Mr Mayor, that's the situation there, but we've heard quite a lot about what Labour might be doing should it assume any form of power anywhere. And Councillor Morgan mentioned casinos, and that brought to mind a phrase: Labour is offering a political equivalent of Scampi in the basket. It's the same tawdry fare, but they're trying to disguise it with a bit of liquor work and a napkin. I hear nothing substantial coming forward by way of sustenance. And indeed, Ed Balls, to use a phrase he used in a different context yesterday, is simply offering more of the long, slow burn of austerity measures. This immoral compass cannot continue. National change is needed to give meaning to what we are all trying to do here in our different ways, to actually make a difference to people's lives. We are being thwarted in that. It's an appalling situation, and to Councillor Morgan, I commend the Police Commissioner, Labour, in Bedfordshire, who is proposing a 14.5% rise in the police precept there, and he thinks he'll win it. These things can be won, and indeed, to pick up on Councillor Carden's point, at the fire authority, some of the Conservatives the other day voted for the 2% rise in the fire authority precept. The ones here didn't, but the East Sussex ones didn't, to perhaps some surprise. So I'll leave it there, except to pick up on Councillor Morgan's phrase about 80s disco songs. Unfortunately, he's made me all evening have the phrase "Daddy Cool" keep going through my mind. I'm going home to listen to something different. Thank you.
Terrible that we might support yourself, sir, in a funny-looking hat, disregarding the duties that you carry out, over 800 engagements in the year, being an ambassador for our city. So therefore, we can save 40 pence per resident. But then is it moral to say, right, let's spend 10 times that money per resident on having a referendum, which we know the result will be lost. It's totally immoral. Obviously, you know, it's always fun with Councillor Hawtrey and his 50 Shades of Green. It did make me feel that probably this chamber was his torture chamber. Mr Mayor, I intend to support Labour Amendment 6, sorry to be political. I do believe, and I think Councillor Summers made reference to this, that councillors should be well informed and well advised, rather than acting in ignorance. And I do believe it's essential that proper assistance is given. So I'm pleased to support Labour Amendment 6.
It is time to stand up and say enough is enough. That is why today I will be refusing to implement further cuts coming down from central government. But let's also be clear about this. A Labour government would not change austerity. They want it to. And I'm not going to support governments that plough ahead with an austerity agenda that damages the poorest in society. Westminster's cosy consensus on economics has failed categorically and comprehensively. And the human cost of this ideologically driven austerity agenda is just too high a price to pay, with the most vulnerable bearing the heaviest burden. The results of which are continuing to do considerable harm to people and their well-being in this city. I say enough is enough. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I will now put the Green Group's amendment number 1 to the vote.
Yes, button on the left.
The result of the vote on the threshold budget was as follows: 13 for, 39 against, no abstentions. The motion was therefore lost.
In view of the failure to approve the revenue budget, I will now adjourn the meeting for a period of 30 minutes to enable group leaders and officers to discuss these serious matters. The meeting is therefore now adjourned and we'll reconvene at 9:35.
Well, my thoughts on this so far is that it's basically politics of the worst order. I mean, we're left in a situation now with the councils, the leaders of the groups of the different parties discussing now whether or not we set any kind of a budget, whether or not we have to have Mr. Pickles' lieutenants from Whitehall come in and take over the running of this town hall. Whatever happened to local democracy? More to the point, I've been talking to a lady outside there who's an employee of the council, and she doesn't know now, right at this moment, whether or not she has a job to go to in the morning. I mean, you can't play politics with people's lives and their livelihoods, whatever your differences. You know, the electorate decided for the third term running to elect no overall control on the council. Surely people have to be pragmatic and work together and compromise to some degree, as the one and only UKIP councillor over here did with independent councillor Christina Summers, the former Green, to put forward a very sensible motion.
Been very productive conversations between the leaders and some independent members. There is clearly a real will to resolve this issue and to set a legal budget for the City Council, which I heartily endorse and colleagues are trying to support. What we've been discussing is a new potential joint amendment that might be able to find favour with the majority of members here. Working on a presumption of what had happened in previous years, but actually before Christmas I think we put a guidance note about the timetable. No, please let me finish. We put a note about the commitments in terms of printing, and it would never have been feasible for Thursday to be the day. It would have to be Tuesday.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask for clarification through you? In previous years, as exactly the same thing, we know council tax bills have to be printed, we understand that, but it's always been the following Thursday. I've heard what the Chief Executive said, but quite frankly I don't see the difference from last year when it's exactly the same system of having to print the bills. Why this year, for some reason, it has to be the Tuesday, when most of us would have assumed, if we hadn't had an agreement tonight, it would be Thursday.
As has been agreed through leaders group, you move forward with that. We can return shortly without further debate tonight to set a budget as soon as possible. Thank you.
No, there should be a show of hands.
I will suggest that we meet on Tuesday, but what I'm asking is a 10 o'clock meeting better than a 4 o'clock in the evening.
They've got a belly band in town, you should know that.
4 o'clock sounds better, so we adjourn the meeting until 4 o'clock on Tuesday. Thank you very much.
I think a complete and utter farce.
They can't make a decision in all those hours.
They're
yeah.
elected to make a decision.
Yeah.
And you know, they know perfectly well a decision has to be made.
Yeah.
As I said earlier on, posture politics is absolutely worse. What are the electorate to make of this?
Yeah. So
the decision should have been made today, as I said earlier on. This is a hung council. When there's a hung council, democracy means that sometimes people have to compromise, and you know, a budget has to be set. Anyone would think, you know, that they almost wanted Mr. Pickles to march in and take over the town. Well, I don't, and neither do you. I need one. after all that.
Well, I'm just wondering how it's going to fit on my
I finished. You're leaving the bags on. Okay.